When the lights go out and the internet turns into a static hiss, the first thing human beings do is cluster. It is a biological imperative, hardwired into your monkey brain. You might think you're a lone wolf, a solitary survivor ready to vanish into the woods with your bug-out bag and a rugged scowl. But let's be real for a second. In a total collapse scenario, a lone wolf is just a loot drop for the first organized group that stumbles across their campfire. Survival alone is theoretically possible, sure, in the same way that performing your own appendectomy is theoretically possible. It's difficult, it's bloody, and the odds are overwhelmingly in favor of you dying in a ditch. Groups simply survive better. They offer more eyes to watch the perimeter, more backs to carry the heavy lifting, and a diversity of skills that one person simply cannot possess. You can't be a doctor, a botanist, a sniper, and a mechanic all at the same time, no matter how many YouTube tutorials you watched before the grid went down. So, people organize. They always do. Across every historical collapse, from the Bronze Age to the fall of Rome, humans clot together like blood cells trying to stop a wound. But here is the brutal truth that most preppers ignore. Not all blood clots save the patient. Some cause a stroke. In every collapse, 5 specific types of groups inevitably form. It's almost like a law of physics. Humans, when subjected to extreme pressure, crystallize into these 5 distinct structures. They have different values, different hierarchies, and vastly different life expectancies. 4 of these groups are walking dead men. They are doomed by their own internal logic, destined to burn out, starve out, or tear each other apart within months. Only one type actually makes it. Understanding which group is which isn't an academic exercise for sociology majors. It is the difference between life and death. Because sooner or later, you will either form a group, join a group, or be targeted by a group. Your survival depends entirely on recognizing the taxonomy of the apocalypse. You need to know if the people waving you down are the ones who will save you, or the ones who will eat you. And the group that actually survives, it's not the one you think. It isn't the one with the most guns, the highest walls, or the most pristine stockpile of freeze-dried beef stroganoff. The survivors understand something about human dynamics that the failures don't, something counterintuitive that goes against every action movie instinct you've absorbed since childhood. Let's talk about the first group. We call them the Tactical Militia. You know exactly what this looks like. This is the wet dream of every gear-obsessed prepper who spent his life savings on body armor and thermal optics but forgot to do any cardio. These groups are usually founded by former military, law enforcement, or just tactical enthusiasts who have been waiting their whole lives for an excuse to wear a plate carrier to the grocery store. On day 1 of the collapse, they look like the absolute winners. They look like a professional paramilitary unit. They have a rigid hierarchy based on rank. Someone is the commander, everyone else is a subordinate. Orders flow down, compliance flows up. It looks efficient. It looks safe. They have AR-15 seconds with all the furniture, night vision capability, encrypted comms, and a fortified compound with overlapping fields of fire. They establish a perimeter, they run aggressive patrols, and they project force. To a terrified civilian looking for safety, the Tactical Militia looks like salvation. They offer immediate, visible security in a world gone mad. But here is the catch, and it is a fatal one. The Tactical Militia is trying to fight a war. But the apocalypse isn't a war. It's a resource management crisis. These groups form because people gravitate toward what they know. If you spent 20 years in the Marines, you build a structure that looks like a platoon. If you spent 20 years watching movies about Marines, you build a structure that looks like a movie set. They attract the wannabe operators, the guys who see the end of the world as a chance to finally live out their Call of Duty fantasies. But reality has a nasty way of crushing fantasies. The first thing that kills the Tactical Militia is the calorie math. Military operations are incredibly expensive in terms of energy and resources. Running combat patrols in full gear burns thousands of calories a day. In a modern army, you have a massive logistics tail stretching back to the taxpayer to feed that machine. In the apocalypse, you have whatever is in the pantry. They burn through fuel for their vehicles and ammo for their training drills at a rate that is completely unsustainable. They are driving Hummers around a world that has run out of gas stations. Furthermore, their aggressive posture creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of violence. They embrace the force protection mindset. They patrol their territory, they challenge outsiders, and they dominate the landscape. In doing so, they make enemies. Every time they flex their muscles to intimidate a neighbor, they create a future insurgent. They trigger conflict through their visible strength. Eventually, they pick a fight they can't win, or they simply get worn down by 1,000 small cuts. They believe their superior training makes them invincible, leading to overconfidence. They engage threats they should avoid because their only tool is a hammer. So every problem looks like a nail, but the internal rot is just as dangerous. Rigid hierarchies are brittle. In a collapse, when the commander makes a bad call like raiding a town that's riddled with cholera, the subordinates can't override him without breaking the structure of the group. Bad leadership kills the whole unit because everyone followed orders right off a cliff. And let's not forget the personalities involved. You put 20 alpha male types with guns and high stress levels in a confined space, and you don't get a band of brothers. You get a powder keg. Factions form. People argue over tactics. The guy who thinks he should be leader starts whispering in the ears of the sentries. The tactical militia usually implodes within 3 to 6 months, having burned through their ammo, their food, and their goodwill. They die well-armed, looking cool, and wondering why their tactical superiority didn't stop them from starving to death. Next, we have the polar opposite, the community coalition. This is what happens when the local homeowners association decides to survive the end of the world. It's the neighborhood watch scaling up. These are neighbors who knew each other before the fall, banding together to maintain order and share resources. They are trying to preserve the values of the old world democracy, fairness, cooperation, and the rule of law. It sounds lovely, doesn't it? It sounds like the moral high ground. They have inclusive membership. Anyone from the subdivision can join. They hold town hall meetings where they vote on decisions. They pool their food and water into a communal stockpile. They establish community gardens and water collection systems. Their defensive posture is non-aggressive. They just want to be left alone to grow their tomatoes and wait for the government to come back. They form because humans naturally trust the people they know. You trust Bob from next door because you've borrowed his lawnmower. You want to believe that civilization isn't dead, just paused. Clinging to pre-collapse values is a psychological defense mechanism. Admitting that the world is now a savage, amoral place is traumatizing. So they build a little bubble of nice and pretend everything is fine. But the community coalition is doomed by its own virtues. The first killer is the free rider problem. In a system based on voluntary sharing, there will always be parasites. There's the guy who claims his back hurts so he can't stand guard duty, but he's first in line for rations. There's the family that eats more than their share but contributes nothing. In a survival situation, resentment builds fast. The people doing the work start looking at the people doing the taking, and the social contract begins to fray. Democracy, frankly, sucks in a crisis. When a gang of marauders is coming down the street, you cannot hold a committee meeting to debate the ethical implications of using lethal force. You can't vote on whether to evacuate. By the time the community coalition has seconded the motion and counted the show of hands, they are already dead. Their inclusivity is a massive security vulnerability. Because they let everyone from the neighborhood join, they absorb liabilities, the sick, the injured, the unstable, and the useless. They can't kick out the dangerous alcoholic or the guy with a violent temper because that's not who we are. Their desire to be good people makes them soft targets. And predators love soft targets. A cooperative, peaceful group with a big pile of shared resources is basically a buffet for the darker elements of the wasteland. Gangs see the community coalition not as a threat, but as a grocery store. When the violence finally comes, the coalition isn't ready. They try to reason with unreasonable people. They try to apply the rules of civil society to a world that has torn up the rulebook. The final nail in the coffin for the community coalition isn't usually the external attack. It's the internal collapse of the fairness doctrine. When the supermarket shelves have been empty for 8 weeks and the communal pantry is down to a few dusty cans of lima beans, the social contract evaporates. Human altruism is a luxury of abundance. When starvation sets in, the primitive lizard brain takes over. A mother with 2 starving children looks at the single bachelor next door who is receiving the same ration size, and she doesn't see a neighbor anymore. She sees a calorie thief. She thinks, why should he eat when my kids are dying? The disputes over distribution stop being polite debates in the town hall and start involving kitchen knives. Factions fracture along lines of closest friendship or secret alliances. The timeline for this tragedy is depressingly consistent: 2 to 4 months. The free rider problems start immediately, but it takes about 60 days for the resentment to boil over into violence. By the time the raiders actually show up, the neighborhood watch has usually already destroyed itself, leaving the gates wide open. So, if you can't trust your neighbors, who can you trust? The answer, for many, is blood. This brings us to group 3, the family clan. This is the blood runs thicker than water strategy. It's the extended family clustering together parents, siblings, weird cousins, and that one uncle who always smelled like turpentine, all consolidating into one location. Usually, this happens at the patriarch's property, the family farm, or whoever has the biggest basement. The organizational structure is simple. It's the family tree. Grandpa or dad is the CEO, the adult children are the middle management, and the grandkids are the labor force. The foundation of this group is intense, unshakable loyalty. You trust your brother in a way you will never trust a stranger, even if your brother is an idiot. In a world where betrayal means death, that deep biological trust feels like a fortress. They form the family clan because it's the path of least resistance. You don't need to interview candidates or build rapport. The relationships are already there, forged over decades of Christmas dinners and shared trauma. They are insular and suspicious. They view anyone who doesn't share their DNA as a potential threat. They hoard resources strictly for the bloodline. If a starving stranger stumbles to their gate begging for water, the answer is a shotgun barrel to the face, because every drop of water given to a stranger is one less drop for the grandchild. It's a ruthless, genetically driven strategy that kept our ancestors alive during the Ice Age. But there's a reason we don't live in tribes anymore. The family clan has a fatal flaw. The gene pool is also a skill pool, and yours is probably too shallow. The downfall of the family clan is a lack of diversity, not in the HR sense, but in the capability sense. The skills available to the group are limited to whatever random skills your family members happen to have picked up during their lives. What are the odds that your immediate family contains a combat-experienced soldier, a trauma surgeon, a master carpenter, and an electrical engineer? Close to zero. You probably have an accountant, a yoga instructor, a mid-level marketing manager, and a semi-pro gamer. That's a great team for a trivia night, but it's a terrible team for the apocalypse. When the generator dies, or someone gets an infected tooth, or the crop gets a fungal blight, the family clan is helpless. They can't fix the problem because the knowledge simply isn't in the room. And because they are so paranoid about outsiders, they refuse to recruit the people who do have those skills. Furthermore, family dynamics are toxic to rational decision-making. We call this the inbreeding of ideas. If the patriarch, let's say, stubborn old Grandpa Joe decides that the best way to defend the farm is to stack hay bales around the perimeter, nobody is going to tell him that hay is flammable and offers zero ballistic protection. Why? Because he's Grandpa. The hierarchy is based on birth order, not competence. The family doubles down on bad strategies because challenging the leader feels like a personal betrayal. Old resentments surface under stress. The sibling rivalry from 20 years ago explodes when resources get tight. The sister who always felt ignored, the brother who felt judged, these emotional landmines go off, and the group fractures from the inside. They last longer than the Tactical Militia or the Community Coalition, usually about 4 to 8 months, because the loyalty is real. But eventually, a problem arrives that they are not genetically equipped to solve, and they wither away, fiercely protecting a kingdom of ash. Then, there is the group that decides to opt out of production entirely. Group 4, the Raider Gang. These are the predators. Their philosophy is simple. Take everything, leave nothing. Why spend months growing potatoes when you can just kick in a door and take someone else's potatoes? This is a parasitic survival strategy. They don't produce, they consume. The group looks mobile, aggressive, and terrifying. They are heavily armed, though usually not with the discipline of the Tactical Militia. They are a loose hierarchy based on brutality. The strongest, meanest psychopath is in charge until someone stronger and meaner cuts his throat. They live essentially like a rolling party of violence, fueled by adrenaline and stolen goods. Raider gangs form from the criminal elements of society and the people who choose violence as a primary tool. But they also attract a surprising demographic, the failures. These are the people who couldn't farm, couldn't build, and couldn't organize. They realized that building things is hard, but breaking things is easy. It attracts the short-term thinkers, The people who want the immediate reward of a full belly without the 6 months of labor it takes to harvest a crop. In the early days of a collapse, the raider gang feels like the winning team. They are the apex predators. They sweep through the suburbs, overwhelming the weak community coalitions, taking what they want and living like kings on a pile of looted, canned peaches and top-shelf liquor. It feels like absolute freedom. But in nature, parasites that kill their hosts too quickly end up dying themselves. The raider gang burns through resources faster than they can be replenished. They are the locusts of the apocalypse. When they hit a settlement, they don't tax it. They destroy it. They strip it bare, burn the structures, and kill the producers. That means that settlement can never be raided again. It's a single-use resource. As they move through a region, they leave a wake of destruction, creating a dead zone behind them. Eventually, they run out of easy targets. The weak die early. The survivors harden up. By month 6, the only groups left are the ones behind high walls with sniper rifles who have learned to shoot on sight. The raider gang also suffers from what we might call the coalition of consequences. You cannot terrorize a region without making enemies. Every group they threaten, every survivor who escapes their brutality, remembers them. In a vacuum of law, justice becomes a community project. The surviving productive groups, realizing they face an existential threat, will eventually talk to each other. They will pool their resources not to grow food, but to hunt the hunters. A defensive alliance of 3 or 4 settlements is infinitely stronger than a roving band of thugs. The raiders get cornered, and when the pressure turns up, the raider gang falls apart instantly. There is no loyalty among thieves. When the food runs out or the firefights get too intense, they turn on each other. The leader gets fragged, the members scatter, and they die alone in the woods, starving and hunted. The timeline for the raider gang is volatile. They can burn bright for 3 to 9 months. In the early chaos, they are the kings of the wasteland. But they have an expiration date. They have no sustainable skills. They don't know how to purify water without looting tablets. They don't know how to fix their trucks without stealing parts. They are entirely dependent on the existence of productive victims. Once the victims are gone or fortified, the raiders starve. It is a suicide pact disguised as a power trip. So, we have reviewed the 4 failures. The ones who try to be soldiers, the ones who try to be nice, the ones who cling to family, and the ones who try to be wolves. All of them fail because they are rigid structures trying to survive in a fluid chaos. They are trying to impose a preconceived shape onto a world that keeps changing its shape. They all lack the one thing that evolution demands: adaptability. But there is a 5th group, a group that doesn't look like a group at all, a group that breaks all the rules of traditional prepping, and in doing so, manages to outlive everyone else. This brings us to the only strategy that actually works: the cockroach in the nuclear winter of social structures, the adaptive network. If you walked past an adaptive network, you wouldn't even know you'd seen one. To the untrained eye, it doesn't look like a group at all. There is no compound with razor wire. There are no matching uniforms or rank insignias. There is no town hall with a gavel. It looks like a scattering of independent survivors, just random people trying to get by. But underneath that chaotic surface is a web of invisible steel. The adaptive network is a decentralized, flexible system of cooperation that prioritizes survival over ego, ideology, or territory. It is the guerrilla warfare version of a society. It acknowledges a fundamental truth. In a chaotic environment, rigid structures snap, but flexible webs just bend. Here is what it looks like. Imagine a series of small nodes. A node is just a tiny cluster of people, maybe 2 to 5 individuals maximum. This is a manageable size. You don't need a constitution to decide where to plant the potatoes when there are only 3 of you. You just talk. Each node is independent. They have their own safe house, their own supplies, their own sovereignty. But, and this is the key, they are connected. They maintain constant, low-level communication with other nodes in the region. They trade, they share intelligence, and they help each other, but they do not merge. The network operates on specialization without dependency. Let's say Node A is a couple of mechanics living in a garage. They can fix anything, but they are terrible farmers. Node B is a family with a green thumb who has turned a backyard into a calorie factory, but they can't fix a leaky faucet to save their lives. Node C is a solitary former combat medic who lives in a basement and hates people, but has a stockpile of antibiotics. In a traditional group, you'd try to force all these people to live in the same building under one leader. The mechanics would get annoyed at the crying babies in the farming family, the medic would chafe under the leadership of the mechanic, tensions would rise, someone would get stabbed. In the adaptive network, they stay apart. The mechanics fix the farmer's tractor in exchange for 100 pounds of potatoes. The farmer trades surplus corn to the medic for penicillin. The medic trades intel about a roving raider gang to the mechanics in exchange for generator repair. Everyone benefits from the specialization of the others, but nobody is completely dependent on any single person for their daily survival. If the mechanics get wiped out by a flu virus, the network takes a hit, but it doesn't collapse. The farmers and the medic are still operational. There is no single point of failure. There is no head of the snake to cut off, because the snake is actually 1,000 ants moving in unison. Why do they survive? Because they are information dominance machines. Because the nodes are physically distributed across a few miles, they act like a sensor net. If raiders enter the valley from the north, Node A sees them and radios Node B and C. The network knows the threat is coming before the threat even knows the network exists. They can coordinate a defense, or more likely, a coordinated evasion without ever needing to gather in one spot to be slaughtered. They avoid the target fixation of the other groups. The tactical militia paints a bullseye on their back with their fortress. The community coalition looks like a looting opportunity. The adaptive network looks like nothing. Just empty houses and scattered refuse. Raiders drive right past the network's hidden caches and camouflage safe houses because there is nothing juicy to attack. Invisibility is the ultimate armor. This structure also solves the recruitment problem. In a rigid group, bringing in a stranger is a massive risk. If they are crazy, they can destroy the whole group from the inside. In a network, you can audition a new node. You meet a stranger. You don't invite him into your house. You treat him as a potential independent node. You trade with him. You test him. If he turns out to be a psycho, you cut contact. And he doesn't know where you sleep. If he turns out to be solid, he becomes a new node in the web, adding his skills and resources to the collective without endangering your core security. The network can expand and contract organically, breathing with the environment rather than fighting it. The adaptive network is reality-based, not ideology-based. It doesn't care about restoring democracy or maintaining military discipline or preserving the purity of the bloodline. It cares about waking up tomorrow. It is ruthlessly pragmatic. If a strategy works, they keep it. If it stops working, they drop it instantly. They don't have to hold a vote or ask Grandpa for permission to change tactics. This allows them to pivot faster than any other group. When the environment changes, say, a massive flood hits the valley, the tactical militia drowns, trying to save their heavy equipment. The family clan refuses to leave the ancestral home and gets washed away. The adaptive network simply picks up their light packs, signals the other nodes, and moves to higher ground, re-establishing the web in a new location. So, look in the mirror. Which group are you building? Be honest. If you are currently digging a trench around your property and buying matching fatigues for your friends, you are building a tactical militia. You are building a coffin. You are heading for the 3 to 6 month failure window, where you will either run out of ammo or be killed by a drone flown by a 4-year-old warlord. If you are organizing neighborhood potlucks and trying to get everyone to sign a non-aggression pact, you are building a community coalition. You are heading for the 2 to 4 month window. You will be eaten alive by the first group of bad actors who realize your security team is just terrified accountants with baseball bats. If you are locking the doors and swearing that you will only trust your own kin, you are building a family clan. You are buying yourself maybe 8 months of stability before you die of a preventable infection because Uncle Jerry thinks he can cure gangrene with essential oils. If you are planning to just steal what you need, congratulations, you're a raider. Enjoy your short, brutal life. You'll feel like a god for 3 months until a quiet, unassuming farmer puts a round through your chest from 300 yards away. But if you want to live, really live, for years, decades, long enough to see the world start to heal, you need to build the network. Start now. You don't need a compound. You need relationships. Find 2 or 3 people you trust with your life that is your core node. Then, look outward. Identify the guy down the road who keeps bees. Identify the nurse who lives 2 streets over. Identify the mechanic who works out of his garage. Go talk to them. Don't try to recruit them into a club. Just build the bridge. Hey, if things go south, I have a ham radio and I know how to use it. If you ever need comms, I'm here. By the way, I might need some help with my car sometime. That's it. That is how the seed is planted. You establish the protocols of trade and communication before the sky falls. You build the web while the internet is still on. So, when the darkness finally comes, you aren't alone, but you aren't trapped either. You are part of a living, breathing, invisible organism that can survive anything the apocalypse throws at it. Structure kills. Flexibility survives. The impressive, loud, organized groups are just monuments to human hubris. They are the Titanic, convinced they are unsinkable right up until the ice water hits the deck. The adaptive network is the raft. It's not pretty. It's not glorious. It doesn't look good in a recruitment poster. But it floats. And in the end, floating is all that matters.